A platform evaluates participants using visible performance proxies. Rewards are tied to what can be easily measured, not to underlying outcome quality. Participants recognize that only observable signals trigger rewards, and behavior shifts toward optimizing those signals. Feedback arrives late and contains noise relative to actual performance. Participants cannot reliably map actions to real outcomes, but they can map actions to visible signals. Behavior begins aligning with what is seen rather than what actually works. A plausible assumption forms that measured performance reflects true competence. The system appears to reward improvement, reinforcing trust in the proxy. Participants continue refining behaviors that increase visible scores. However, the proxy does not track underlying effectiveness with precision. Actions that improve appearance may have no impact on actual results. The gap between signal and reality begins to widen without immediate detection. Participants adjust further toward actions that reliably move the visible metric. Less observable but more effective behaviors receive no reinforcement. The incentive structure filters behavior toward what is measurable, not what is effective. At first, this looks like consistent improvement across participants. Visible performance metrics rise across the system. The system appears to be producing better outcomes, but outcome quality does not improve at the same rate as the proxy suggests. Delayed feedback obscures this divergence. Participants cannot detect that their adaptations are misaligned. Incorrect behaviors become repeatedly reinforced through the proxy signal. Each iteration strengthens confidence in ineffective actions. The system accumulates behavior that looks correct, but is structurally flawed. Participants begin to rely on the proxy as the primary guide for decision-making. The original objective becomes secondary to maintaining visible performance. Optimization shifts from outcome to signal preservation. Coordination across participants further amplifies the distortion. Shared reliance on the same proxy creates convergence around the same flawed behaviors. System-wide patterns emerge that reinforce the illusion of competence. Attempts to correct behavior are filtered through the same distorted signal. Actions that reduce proxy performance are rejected, even if they improve real outcomes. Correction mechanisms fail to gain traction. The system gradually locks into a feedback loop. Signal-driven behavior produces more signal-aligned reinforcement. Deviation from the proxy becomes increasingly costly. A measurable distortion appears between reported performance and actual results. The system reports improvement while real effectiveness stagnates or declines. The mismatch becomes structurally embedded. Participants entering the system inherit the same signal structure. They adapt immediately to the visible proxy rather than exploring underlying effectiveness. The distortion propagates without resistance. Over time, the cost of abandoning the proxy increases. Participants risk losing rewards if they pursue unmeasured improvements. Lock-in behavior stabilizes around signal optimization. The system no longer distinguishes between true competence and proxy performance. Both are treated as equivalent within the reward structure. Evaluation collapses into signal recognition. At scale, the system produces consistent but misleading indicators of success. Performance appears stable and improving across participants. The underlying outcome remains disconnected. The equilibrium forms around false competence. Participants behave rationally within the given incentives. The system stabilizes despite persistent misalignment between signal and reality. As the proxy becomes the dominant signal, participants begin optimizing earlier in the process. Actions are selected not for outcome contribution, but for immediate visibility within the feedback window. Short-term signal alignment overrides any delayed outcome verification. Delayed feedback continues to arrive, but its informational value weakens over time. Participants cannot reconcile discrepancies between signal and outcome because the signal has already guided behavior. The system loses its ability to self-correct through feedback. Small improvements in proxy performance become harder to achieve. Participants intensify optimization efforts around the same observable dimensions. Behavior compresses into narrower, more predictable patterns. The system registers this convergence as consistency. Reduced variance in visible performance is interpreted as increased reliability. Signal uniformity is mistaken for systemic improvement. However, the same convergence reduces exploration of alternative actions. Unobserved strategies are abandoned due to lack of reinforcement. The system's adaptive capacity declines while appearing stable. Scaling amplifies the distortion. More participants optimizing the same proxy increase the volume of signal-aligned behavior. The feedback loop strengthens without improving underlying outcomes. As participation grows, the proxy becomes the shared reference point across the system. Coordination emerges around maintaining signal performance rather than outcome quality. Collective behavior reinforces the same distortion at scale. Attempts to interpret declining real outcomes are filtered through the proxy. When outcomes fail, participants adjust signal strategies instead of underlying actions. Misalignment deepens while remaining undetected. At this stage, the system appears internally coherent. Signal, behavior, and reward are tightly aligned. Only the connection to real outcomes has weakened. An analytical tension emerges. The system cannot determine whether declining outcomes reflect external conditions or internal misalignment. The signal provides no basis to resolve this ambiguity. Participants respond by doubling down on proxy optimization. Uncertainty increases reliance on what is measurable. The system reinforces the same behavior under higher uncertainty. Over time, the cost of deviating from the proxy rises further. Participants who experiment with unmeasured actions lose immediate rewards. Exploration becomes structurally discouraged. The feedback loop tightens into a closed system. Signal drives behavior, behavior reinforces signal, and feedback validates both. External outcome information becomes irrelevant to decision-making. The system begins to standardize evaluation entirely around the proxy. Assessment mechanisms no longer reference underlying performance. Signal becomes the sole criterion of competence. At scale, this produces stable but misleading system-wide indicators. Performance appears optimized across all participants. The distortion is fully integrated into the system's operation. Any late-arriving accurate feedback fails to alter behavior. It cannot compete with the immediate and consistent proxy signal. Correction attempts are absorbed without changing the loop. The system continues to operate as if it is improving. Participants continue to adapt rationally within the signal structure. The distortion sustains itself without requiring further reinforcement. Under the stabilized system, rewards are consistently tied to visible proxy performance. Actions that improve the signal are immediately reinforced, while actions that improve real outcomes without affecting the proxy receive no recognition. Behaviors that diverge from the proxy begin to carry implicit penalties. Participants who pursue underlying effectiveness lose relative standing in the visible system, narrowing viable strategies toward signal alignment. Over time, evaluation fully centers on the proxy as the accepted definition of competence. The system no longer distinguishes between signal improvement and actual performance, locking behavior into maintaining measurable appearance. In the prior state, feedback linked actions, however imperfectly, to outcomes. In the new equilibrium, feedback validates only what is visible, and behavior reorganizes entirely around sustaining that signal. Participants operate within a stable constraint, optimize what is measured, or lose position. The system continues to function predictably, even as the connection between behavior and real outcomes remains structurally disconnected.